So when I think about a true off-road vehicle, especially in the market today, to me, what differentiates a true off-roader from a wannabe off-roader is a solid rear axle. That's vehicles like this one, the Toyota Land Cruiser, the Lexus GX and Lexus LX, Toyota 4Runner, lots of Toyotas, every pickup on sale outside of the Honda Ridgeline, and what else? The Jeep Wrangler and the Gladiator, the upcoming Ford Bronco, and is that about it? If Nissan were to bring back an Xterra, it would assumedly fall into that category as well. But beyond that, there really aren't a lot of off-roaders left. And the GWagen is by far the most expensive and the most exclusive and the most premium. This vehicle, as equipped, costs $135,000, the one that I'm sitting in right now. And it's pretty much a base model. It's got an adaptive suspension, so it's got adaptive dampers that are great as far as I can tell off-road so far. Tilt this a little closer. Yeah, the adaptive dampers are great, and then it's got like a mild interior package that gets you like this Alcantara headliner and I think nicer seat leather and a nicer steering wheel. But anyway, pretty much a base model, and you can get one of these things all the way up to like $200K once you get into AMG territory. In that price bracket, you've got Bentley Bentayga, the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, Lamborghini Urus, I guess, and that's about it in terms of like super exclusive 4x4s. And out of all those, this is the only one, in my opinion, this is the only one with true off-road capability, relative to some of your heavy-duty 4x4s. Those other three, they've got off-road capability, but they're not like this. They don't have a solid rear axle. They don't have three locking differentials. I'll get to that in a minute, but this vehicle that I'm in right now has three locking differentials. It's insane. Excuse me, that might make things a little bit better. So yeah, out of all the elite SUVs, by far, in terms of off-road credibility and just like historical significance and heritage, GWagen, amazing. On the topic of locking differentials, if you want to differentiate this vehicle based on its locking differentials, that puts it in a class with only 5 total vehicles on sale in the United States. There are only 5 new vehicles for sale right now in the United States that you can buy that have a locking front differential. Those are the Jeep Wrangler and the Jeep Gladiator, the Ram Power Wagon, the Chevy Colorado ZR2, and the GWagen. So in that company, again, those are all vehicles that cost up to about $60,000, $70,000 fully loaded. So again, GWagen is in a league of its own. If you want to go with the most expensive, or maybe you could say most sophisticated off-roaders on sale today, then you're looking at, alongside the GWagen, Toyota Land Cruiser, Ford F-150 Raptor. And that's about it in terms of price. And I think the Land Cruiser is probably the closest competitor to this vehicle in terms of utility. I will go so far as to say that if I were buying a vehicle primarily for off-roading, primarily for this kind of stuff, I would have to go with the Land Cruiser. It's bigger, it's more functional. I think it's probably a lot more reliable in the long term. And while the Land Cruiser costs around $90,000, that's a ton of money, but that's not $135,000, $150,000. So out of the off-roading elites on sale in the U.S., I'm still going to give the nod to the Land Cruiser. But that said, I think this vehicle's a lot more interesting than the Land Cruiser, for whatever that's worth. Moving on, I guess I should throw the Range Rover Rover into the conversation. My thing with Range Rover and Land Rover is that I don't know what they really do best anymore, and by that I mean that they've all got independent rear suspension now. They've got really good traction control systems and things like that help them to excel off-road, but they're becoming more and more on-road oriented as the years go by. And if I think of an off-road Land Rover, the vehicle that comes to mind is at least 15, if not 20 or 25 years old at this point. So I think the last category, and this may be a bit of a controversial statement, but I want to compare this to other similarly sized sport utility vehicles with a solid rear axle. And that leaves us with only a few Toyota 4Runner and Lexus GX460, which is essentially a Land Cruiser Prado sold in other markets. So GX and the 4Runner are different vehicles, but very similar to one another in terms of who builds them and what they're capable of. This thing is obviously a lot nicer than the 4Runner, and a ton nicer than the GX as well, especially given that both of those vehicles are extremely old at this point. But neither of those have a front locking differential. They both have, well, I think the GX has full-time four-wheel drive with a locking center differential. The 4Runner has part-time four-wheel drive with an available locking rear differential. So none of those have the locking diffs that this vehicle has. I will say that the 4Runner especially is a lot more functional than the GWagen. Again, you could buy 3 loaded 4Runners for the price of 1 GWagen, more or less. But in terms of just space, usable space, functionality, I know the 4Runner has about 50 cubic feet of cargo space behind the second row. This vehicle has only 40 cubic feet of cargo space, and a lot of it's vertical. So I will say the 4Runner is a lot more functional. And then it's hard to compare anything to the GX just because it's so old. It's bordering on obsolete. They still sell pretty well, but not really a worthy competitor to the GWagen in terms of exclusivity and just how special this vehicle feels. I will say there's like no vehicle that I've ever driven has felt as special and as unique as this one. In terms of off-roaders, it really doesn't get much better than this. It's obviously hard for most people to justify taking their $130,000, $150,000 SUV off-road, but this is what it's made for, and it is supremely capable out here. So in terms of the entire 4x4 scene here in the US, the Land Cruiser, just given its reliability and how little I fear when I'm off-road in a Land Cruiser, I'm still inclined to put it at the top of the pile, but I will put this vehicle as a very, very close second, just given how unique and how special it feels to not even just drive one, but even to just look at on this red rock backdrop out here. So that's where I include the GWagen in the American 4x4 hierarchy. It's quite amazing.